a tight schedule. So let's, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And first of all, I want to welcome to another segment of the National High School Golf Association webinar series. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Noble. I manage the National High School Golf Association. And tonight, very, very excited to be joined by an incredible panel of people. People who I've really gotten to know pretty well over these past couple months, and just so fortunate to really have them with me tonight. And for everyone who's watching our panel, we have two things in common. We play golf, and we are all part of the gay and queer community. And tonight, what we are going to discuss are issues that are really surrounding the game of golf itself, junior golf specifically, and really talking about a lot of action items from an inclusion standpoint of how to bring people from all different walks of life, golf coaches, teammates, parents, players, to really help them create a culture that is welcoming to all junior, all high school golfers, no matter their background, no matter their makeup, no matter their sexuality. And our ultimate goal is really growing the game of golf and making it a welcome space for LGBTQ youth. So without further ado, let's go ahead and meet tonight's panel. I'd love to be able to do some introductions here. So my first panelist is Tad Fujikawa. Now, Tad, a lot of people are familiar with. Obviously, he was on the scene pretty early in his junior golf days. Actually, back in 2006, he qualified for the U.S. Open as an amateur at the age of 15. He was the youngest golfer to ever do so. In 2007, at the age of 16 years and 4 days, he actually made the cut in a PGA Tour event at the Sony Open in Hawaii. And at that time, Tad was the second youngest player to ever achieve that feat. So, Tad, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This really means a lot.
Absolutely. Means a lot for you to be here. Next on our panelist list, we have Mel Reed. Now, Mel is a very accomplished professional LPGA tour player. As she was just mentioning a moment ago, she's actually at an event this week, and as busy as she is practicing, prepping, she was able to take time out of her busy schedule to be with us, which is just fantastic. For Mel, she actually has had 3 appearances in the Solheim Cup. She has competed on the LPGA Tour since the year 2015, and she's actually won 5 times on the Ladies European Tour as well. So, Mel, again, I can't tell you how much I really appreciate you being here tonight with us as well.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for for making me part of this and inviting me into this panel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And next we have Maya Reddy. Now, Maya is a 3-time Division III All-American. She went to Claremont McKenna College out in California. She was a 3-time All-Region West team player. And in 2012, she was the SCIAC Player of the Year as well. And Maya also did compete on the Symetra Tour as well. So definitely no stranger to the professional competitive field. So again, Maya, thank you for taking the time and being part of the panel tonight too.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for putting this together. It's awesome. It's a really cool event.
Thank you guys, and absolutely, thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, we have Greg Fitzgerald. Now, for those of you who don't know Greg, he has actually been in the golf industry for over 22 years now. Greg is a member of the PGA of America, and he has been so for 18 years. He currently serves as the head professional out at the Institute in Morgan Hill, California, where he also chairs a committee on diversity and inclusion for golf, especially within the Northern California PGA chapter. So, Greg, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight.
No, thank you, Chris, and thanks everybody for being here. I don't have quite the playing record of our other panelists, but I think I can bring some value to the conversation coming from the PGA of America industry side of things. So really looking forward to it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and really before everyone, we kind of get into the actual material here tonight for the webinar, I did want to kind of present a question especially to my panel. And Tad, we'll start with you. And I think it'd just be a great way to open up the conversation. And really the question that I think everyone needs to consider here tonight is, why is it important for more visibility and education of the LGBTQ community in golf? And really from that, how can that help us grow the game and continue to expand its reach?
For me, I believe that it's important, just because of, so far, I mean, there hasn't been hardly any progressive, movements as far as the LGBTQ community in golf. And, I think for the players that are growing up, the junior golfers, the college players, the up and coming professional golfers, I think it's so important just for them to feel like they're accepted. It's hard enough as it is. And I mean, I personally know that it's hard enough as it is going through this sort of thing, and then trying to compete in something you're so passionate about. It makes it really, really difficult. And I think everyone should deserve the opportunity to be their best and to live the way they want to live.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. And Mel, for yourself, I mean, what would you say, especially from that visibility standpoint and just education of really, our community, especially at the junior golf level?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that, our community is still a little bit of a taboo in sport. I think that, men are seen, that play sport are still seen to having to be a certain stereotype. And I think that women are, have to be a certain stereotype as well. So for me, I feel like, the inclusion of the LGBTQ community all comes from education. I don't feel that people are born homophobic. I don't feel like people are born racist. It's all how they're educated in their environment. And so it's extremely important to kind of go back to the roots and, go back to as close to base level as we possibly can and educate these guys that, not to be scared of it. We're all part of one world. And, for me, that's kind of where it comes from, is this education.
Right. Absolutely. And how about yourself?
I think visibility is so incredibly important. I talk a lot about it with the work that I do with the Gation Project, that when you see somebody that looks like you or who shares parts of your identity kind of out in a mainstream type of way, that almost validates your own identity as worthy of belonging in that space. I think in addition to what Mel just said, that like education is so incredibly important, and it allows us to see beyond these stereotypes that, we're socialized with, unfortunately. Visibility among queer kids is so important, because they see themselves, out on tour kicking butt. And they know that just by having somebody who's visible and win the ANA or play on the Solheim Cup, and so that's why that's where that visibility part of it is so important. And it also kind of breeds community, because the more you see yourself and the more that you see people like you, that there are others out there, and you can find that bond of community and that solidarity in this sometimes alienating sport.
Absolutely. And Greg, yourself?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everybody said. And growing up gay is such a challenge. But sports for all kids is such an important part of their lives. And, if you can't be yourself and be out and be a part of a team, it just, it makes you feel lesser. And so if kids can come out, whether it's in high school or college, and feel like they're comfortable and in an inclusive environment, they'll feel like they're much more a part of being whole, and that's what's most important. Right,
absolutely. I appreciate everybody's insight there, and definitely some great topics, that we're going to touch on, especially during our time here tonight. So, well, keeping that in mind, just briefly, for everybody who's not familiar with the National High School Golf Association, who we are, what we do. Our main focus and goal is really the growth and recognition of high school golf throughout the country. Ways we do that are through state, national rankings, where especially high school golf a lot of time is an afterthought rather than a forethought in the industry. So really giving it a true resource and a home where coaches can find content on how to best serve their teams. Players can find a lot of information of how to play at the next level, even material that we're doing tonight on, again, how to serve especially a team that has LGBTQ players or golfers who might be struggling with their identity, their sexuality, and knowing that they're not alone. Even in 2019, in this June, we're actually running the first ever high school golf national invitational that will be held down in Orlando. 348 of the top high school golfers throughout the country are actually going to compete on the national stage. So continuing to really grow that identity for high school golf is our main focus. And just giving everyone a quick outline of tonight. So what we're going to touch on again is really some statistics and findings, especially of LGBTQ youth in sports specifically. Also talking about some findings that we found in golf, kind of finding some similarities, some differences from other sports, and really looking at golf as a whole and what does that diversity look like. It's a term that's thrown around a lot, but I don't know if a lot of people really fully grasp and understand it, and especially education and training. I think that's the biggest takeaway that we want to promote tonight for coaches, for PGA pros, for PGA junior league captains, first tee league managers. If you have somebody who's on your team that's part of this community, how do you best serve them and still act as a mentor and a coach to them? And really resources and education that anybody can access to better serve their teams, better serve their players and their communities, just to make it a better space for all. So with that, I'd like to touch on the idea of, especially as we've already been saying, the terminology of LGBTQ plus really the terminology. A lot of people hear it. There's a lot of golf coaches, a lot of people within the community that actually don't even know what it means. So that's a great place to start. And again, it's an umbrella term that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning. The main thing to always remember is that ultimately this acronym is ever changing. It's not something that has to be the same today as it will be a year from now, but the whole purpose of it is to really identify and include all members of our community to make sure that everybody has that inclusive feel to it overall. And Maya, I did want to, really kind of go to you for this and yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I know you really identify more as queer yourself than gay. And I know for a lot of people who might be watching this, especially in the older generation, the word queer has a negative connotation to it. And a lot of people might be uncomfortable saying it. So would you want to maybe shed some light on that and potentially even the transgender, especially community as well?
Yeah, so I identify as queer because for me, it feels like a term that allows for the fluidity of both my sexual orientation as well as my gender presentation. I do identify as a cisgender woman, so my pronouns would be she and hers, but I do think that kind of in my own identity, some days I will present, more masculine or more feminine. And I think queer as an umbrella term for me allows for that fluidity. But that being said, it's different for every person who identifies as queer. And Chris, like you were saying, it does have a long history of negative connotations because back, I want to say around the 60s, queer was used in a very medical, sanitary way that was used against the LGBTQ community to kind of, try to sterilize it away and take it out of society and classifying it as a disorder in the DSM-4 and things like that. And so there is a lot of history in this being a negative term, which is why so many folks in the older end of the LGBTQ community tend to be a little bit averse to using the term, whereas folks that are around my age, like the millennials, the younger generations, are really starting this movement reclaim queer as kind of an empowering term and redefine it on our own terms and in our own voices. And along with that, I think that overall the feeling towards queer as a term and as an identity is this really this kind of gratitude or excitement, might not be the right words I'm using there, but about the fluidity that it does allow. Because I think, as you mentioned earlier, these acronyms and these identities are ever changing, and it can be very different for one person day to day. And that fluidity is something that I think is so important to and honor, and it allows for queer to embrace the whole of the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And I think when it comes to trans identities, I by no means want to speak for the trans community, as I'm not part of the trans community, but I think that today, in this current climate, we are able to talk so much more freely about trans communities in a way that is empowering and respectful to those communities, whereas previously, because of the otherness of that community and the difference, there was a lot of aversion to it. To define what trans means, it describes the identity of a person whose gender identity is different from the sex that they are assigned to as birth. So a thing to really highlight here is that gender and sex are two different things, and gender identity and sexual orientation are two different things. And transgender as well can also be considered as an umbrella term for identities that are non-binary or genderqueer. So identities that don't exclusively identify as male or female. And again, as with like all of the other identities within the LGBTQ plus spectrum, there is a lot of fluidity that can appear amongst all of these identities. And as well, another note is that gender presentation and gender identity are two different things. So the way that somebody presents is not necessarily going to be what their gender identity is. So to respect a person's identity is just to see them as they want to be seen.
Right. Thank you for that, Maya. And like you said, I mean, it's something that, I think is still important, for just anybody within golf who might know of somebody, that's part of our community, and really having that terminology to a point where they're comfortable saying the words and using them. And it's okay, if they don't have all those answers. Again, there are resources to help them. And of course, we'll be able to really shed some light on that, especially toward the end. So. Thank you for that. That's fantastic. And really just transitioning here briefly into a couple of stories that I wanted to highlight. I actually found both of these through a news sports publication. It's called Outsports. I was really introduced to Outsports just by, kind of really doing some research, especially on gay athletes in sports. And it's a fantastic publication and site where really a lot of, whether they're junior athletes or college or professional, part of the LGBTQ community, they're able to share their coming out stories. Some are really inspiring, empowering, and others are, it was a hard time. Peyton Bradley is an example of having a difficult time. And actually, I'd like to kind of read an excerpt from Peyton's story. And his excerpt goes, after a few weeks, they, as in his golf team, started grabbing my clubs out of the locker room and throwing them, scattering them all over the ground, down a hill, into bushes. I bought a padlock and started locking my clubs into the locker just so no one could get to them. But they still managed to grab something from my bag because there were 5 of them against me. My golf balls were thrown into ponds, sometimes my hat or sunglasses. Anything they could do to harass me, they did. Guys in my class would take pictures of me and write faggot under the photo and send it to people. After school, the team would yell, steal my things, or push me to the ground. Even the kids and parents in my youth group would tell me I wasn't welcome. And when I heard that, it broke my heart. And I think the excerpt that I have there on the slide, where he did say at the end of my freshman year, I had lost any feeling I had for golf. It's just terrible. And I don't think anybody should really feel that way, especially that's part of the golf community, because the great thing with our game is it doesn't matter your background or where you come from. It's a score that you shoot. And it just was really, really spoke to me. And Maya, I know for yourself, you had a similar story, especially kind of through your junior and college years. Would you want to maybe just touch on that for a few moments, maybe relating to Peyton's story?
Yeah, fortunately for me, it was not as severe as what Peyton went through. And I remember when you showed me his story, I was astounded because a lot of times you are insulated in a coastal town or coastal state like I am in California. You kind of know that things like this happen, but you are somewhat insulated. For me, I didn't have my junior golf experiences and my college golf experiences were great, but it was when I turned pro that things really turned for the worse. And it was kind of through my experiences trying to make it on tour, working my way through the mini tours, that I was exposed to a lot of homophobia and a lot of racism, to the point where I felt like I couldn't step on the golf course. Like every time I went to my home course, which should be my home as it is my home course, I really uncomfortable, because I was frequently hearing members, passing homophobic asides, talking, about Middle Eastern and South Asian ethnicities in very negative ways, which, those are all who I am. And it felt like no matter how much or how good I was, no matter how great my scores were, if I won like 1 million majors, it felt like I would never actually belong in that place. And it got so bad to the point where I did gain some Metro Tour status, but I never played in any events because I had a really severe emotional breakdown, to the point where I empathize with Peyton, because it has taken me about 2.5 years to get back to the point of loving golf again and wanting to get back out on the course and really wanting to play without this like overwhelming pressure to present as less queer, to do everything that I could to pass in this space.
Right.
So it is that feeling of going from loving something so dearly, like this insane sport that we all play, to feeling so unwelcome there, it's really, really difficult.
Right. No, absolutely. And especially Mel, I did want to, kind of open this slide up to you too. And again, with really your coming out, especially, within professional golf. I mean, I think I remember telling you about Peyton's story, especially when we were on the phone about a month ago. And I know you really, in some ways it hurts you, but, can you relate to his story at all? Or maybe it was kind of a different scenario, when you came out.
Yeah, I mean, I've been extremely fortunate. I've never experienced anything to this degree at all. When I came, I thought it was important for me to come out at the end of last year. I was just at a point in my life where I felt very comfortable in my own skin. So I felt that I could receive criticism quite well, but I was received, exceptionally well, considering the circumstances. And, I had a lot of fellow players, LPGA players, LET players, ex-golfers, of all ages, of all different backgrounds, reach out to me and say what a good job I did. So, I'm pretty boring in that respect. Fortunately, I don't have any kind of horror stories or any kind of homophobia stories towards me personally, which I'm obviously very grateful for. So, I've had a fairly easy road, down this road really, compared to a lot that I know really, really struggle with it.
Absolutely. No. And well, actually, even with the next story, I'll kind of highlight it. I think it's maybe one that for yourself, Mel, and I know even for Tad, can relate a little bit more to. And before we move on from Peyton, I did want to kind of share a kind of a silver lining. So I've actually been in touch with him quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, and he's in college now at a college in Colorado. And another thing that we do on another side of our business is we govern collegiate club golf throughout the United States that really provides an opportunity to non-varsity golfers in college. And with Peyton, I actually introduced him to the club president at his college. I know he was really contemplating whether or not to play this spring. He hasn't let me know if he has yet, but he's close. So it's one of those where I think, if you can continue to let them know there are opportunities available, and something that we try to do personally through even our organization, high school and college-wise, that's what it's all about, right? Is continuing to compete and really stay involved and active in the game, and letting them know they have a home. No matter their background or their past. So, well, keeping that in mind, the next story here. So Ben Palmer, again, this is almost a complete 180 really from Peyton's story, but quick excerpt from his Outsports story as well that he provided. When I said I was gay, all the pressure was gone, and I wondered why it took me so long. I knew by the time that my next class ended, a lot of people would know I was right. People asked me on Instagram and other social media if it was true I was gay. I said yes, and asked if that was a problem. They all said no. I didn't get any negative reaction from my golf opponents, and I didn't expect to. when you go out, and I love this, and whip somebody by 15 shots, you expect them to shut up and not comment. How awesome is that, right? So, you know, I wanted to kind of open this up, especially, you know, really, you know, for somebody like, you know, Tad, I know yourself, you said it was a little bit of an easier situation, right? I mean, I don't want to say easy, but a little bit of a smoother transition when you did come out. So you can probably relate to Ben maybe in some respects there.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when I came out, I was expecting the worst, to be honest. And I think we all kind of do that. You know, we expect a lot worse. Luckily, I mean, I've only recently come out, so it was like last year in September. And I think these days it's a lot more accepted. And for me, being the first male professional golfer to come out, it was a lot bigger than I expected. I mean, I expected the congratulatory messages from my friends and my family, you know, people that I'm close to, you know, a few of my fellow competitors, but I didn't expect it to be such a big deal in the golf world, really.
Right.
And you know, having the support, the acceptance, not that I was looking for it, but having the acceptance of like other players, other pros, and people that I've gotten to know, manufacturer companies, stuff like that. I mean, it's really, really cool. You know, I played with a friend in a Monday qualifier 2 days ago, and you know, I haven't seen him since I came out, and he congratulated me and said that, you know, he's very happy for me and that sort of thing. And it's just really cool, you know, to have that support from the people that you wouldn't expect it from. And yeah, so my experiences have been really, really, really good, and I'm very thankful for that. However, there are still a lot of other cases that aren't as positive, and this is why we all need to share our story, and we need to come together to bring more education and to bring more awareness to this issue, so everyone can have equal opportunities, and everyone can have, you know, everyone's able to be themselves. And
right.
I think for me, that's the reason I came out. I just wanted to help other people, and I think that's
Right.
That's what we all stand for. So
right, absolutely. And Greg, yourself, I know, you know, when we talked the other week, I think you in some ways could relate to Ben. I mean, especially, you know, when you did come out yourself, and especially being around golf for as long as you have, you know, what are some things that, you know, maybe takeaways on your side, or even related to that?
Yeah, I definitely had a similar coming out story to Ben versus negative coming out story with Peyton. It was college, not high school. And I know high school can be a little more challenging with kids and how they treat each other. You know, I think when people get to college and adulthood, there's a certain amount of maturity that you gain. And that's definitely a factor. So luckily, when I came out in college, all my friends and family were just wonderfully supportive. And even into professional world in the golf business, every reaction I've had, I mean, literally everyone has been positive. And that makes me really optimistic for the future in golf and in sports. And I think we are in a transitional time where there are still some negative stories, but I think the country, especially in diverse areas, are ready for this, ready for conversations like this, ready to start having equality in every area of the sports world, whether you're at professional level or at the club level like I am. I'm really optimistic that things are changing for the better, and it's going to start happening quicker and quicker, and there's going to be more Ben stories rather than Peyton stories. Yeah, I'm always optimistic, but I'm going to stick with that.
I love it. No, it's exactly right. And I think there's a lot of truth in that, especially as we continue to share our stories and, you know, hopefully encourage and inspire others to share theirs. And, you know, and really the more that we can do that, I think the more of a environment, a culture that we really want to see is going to be realized.
Well, so I was at a PGA meeting today with other Northern California golf professionals, and was telling them about our webinar tonight. And this is a fellow NCPGA golf professional, straight guy, married, texted me 10 minutes before we started tonight. And he said, "Fitz, good luck tonight. You're an inspiration to me. Keep it up, brother." Oh. So that's from a straight man who's giving that kind of support to a gay man, because things are changing for the better. So that's really inspiring.
You know, and like you said, I think the more that we can, you know, really share those types of stories and let everybody know, hey, this is in our game, this is in our community. It's well worth it. Well worth it. So
absolutely fantastic.
Well, that's fantastic, guys. And you're really transitioning from, you know, some of the story side to more of the stats here. So again, I don't want to bog everybody down with statistics, but there are some that I thought was interesting. So a study in 2018, just last year, by the Human Rights Campaign in the University of Connecticut. It's interesting. They actually polled more than 12,000 13 to 17-year-olds really in all the 50 states. Now, mind you, these are all sports, not just golf specific, but it was interesting where about 25% of LGBTQ youth basically say they play a sport, school sport in high school, compared to almost 70% of a national non-LGBTQ example there too. And and a couple questions that I had, and Mel, I think I want to toss it over to you first, is why do you think that statistic, especially of our community compared to a non LGBTQ community, is well less than half the amount of really participation? And I know for yourself, again, you're not from necessarily the United States. I know you have background, especially within soccer and other sports. So just kind of curious to see your thoughts on some of those stats.
I think, again, it comes back to them being, in my opinion, I think scared. I mean, obviously I can't talk for everybody, but, I think that they're nervous. They're going in, I can't really speak on behalf of the guys, but I can imagine what it's like for guys. I can imagine the environment to be a lot different to what it is for women. I have a lot of gay and lesbian friends who have always played sport, especially lesbians who have played sport. So for me, there's always been a high percentage of them in most, sports that I've played. But, I think the environment is a little bit different for guys. I think it's a little bit more scary. And again, this is where I feel like the education needs to come in from the ground up to, educate these coaches, educate the schools, educate even the parents, to let them know that this isn't a scary thing anymore. We're 2019 and, there's good and bad people in every walk of life. And, just because you're part of the, LGBTQ community doesn't mean that you're necessarily a bad person. I still think people are quite scared of that. And I still think that people then are scared to go into these sports and to be part of a team because they're scared of getting ridiculed. They're scared to be, taken the mick out of, as we call it. And they just would prefer to just not be part of that.
Right. No, I think it's a good point. And especially on that note too, Greg, a question I wanted to ask you. I mean, obviously, with this statistic, that's not only, golf is more of an individual sport, as we all know. I mean, some obviously team-based. Do we think it makes a difference that golf is an individual sport as opposed to a team sport? What I mean by that is like a locker room talk or atmosphere compared to a club type, right?
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's definitely a factor. In past generations, 60s, 70s, 80s, I think, talking about the male perspective, gay men would hide in sports, basically. So they would go through high school and college age playing sports, trying not to be found out.
Right.
So they would go through those team aspects, the locker room, the rah-rah, the buddy-buddy stuff. And they would suffer through that because that type of life really sucks. And so many men had to go through that, hiding in the locker room and hiding on a team and not wanting to be found out, but they couldn't be themselves. So that's why so many more LGBTQ people participated in sports years ago. The last statistic you put up makes total sense because now you can come out of the closet earlier, but that also means you can drop off the team, whether it's soccer or football or whatever, and you can get out of the locker room. and get away from all those guys that are making fun of you. So I would think, and I don't necessarily have statistics yet to back this up, but being driven from that team environment to individual sports like gymnastics, tennis, diving, swimming, golf, things like that, I would think is a higher percentage than 24% of LGBTQ youth participating in those sports. Now, I think that's all happening right now in the last, 10, 15 and going forward years. But what would be nice is if it was now okay to do an individual sport or a team sport, whatever you wanted to do. You didn't have to either hide or get out of a certain situation or whatever. But that brings up the fact that kids have to be okay with it. Like other boys need to be okay with the gay boy still on the football team, and other women need to be okay with the other, who they know now to be a lesbian, still in the locker room and on the soccer team. And I think those are real specific issues that have to be dealt with still from parents, coaches, other kids, like you're referring to back in the beginning.
Right.
So there's a lot of work still to be done, but it's very positive time, I think, to address all that. And people are ready to address those questions.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just continuing on, especially the stats side of things. So this is even an extension of that study that I just brought up again by the HRC. So I thought this was interesting. And again, mind you, this was, like I said, when this was taken in 2018, so things can change. But at that time, and there's 33 states in the U.S. that really have anti-LGBTQ sport participation policies specifically geared towards more of the trans community more than anybody else. And what I thought even more interesting is only 20% of LGBTQ youth report that they participate in the sport within those states. So again, it's dropping even more from 24% to 20%. And Maya, I thought this would be a interesting spot for you as well. And I guess really in terms of these stats, I get how can especially golf be more inclusive with these types of issues, especially when it comes to trans inclusion, especially when it may come to, let's say, junior tours or major governing bodies of golf, if they have a gender identity policy specific to competition?
I think that's a question that all governing bodies of sport are really struggling with right now, because I think that there is not a lot of people are well educated what the trans experience is, and that it takes shape in many different ways, and that for someone to be barred from entry to a specific sport because of their gender identity it feels like a slap in the face, as that's something that is quite fluid. And in a lot of these anti-trans, policies that we see in place, and anti-trans attitudes, it feels like people are reducing that identity to one that is just based in hormones and sex, which is very unfair. And I mean, one thing that I want to point out is that there has been discussion about trans inclusive policies in the golf world, specifically on the LPGA. It was back in 2010 that a woman, Lucy Lawless, filed a lawsuit against the LPGA because the Constitution at that point had said that to be eligible to participate on the LPGA, competitors had to be female at birth. So that language in and of itself bars entry for anybody who falls under the trans umbrella. That lawsuit was won. That suit was won, and the Constitution has since been changed to be inclusive of athletes who identify as female. But I think that really shows that there is still such a long way to go, that we have to, that a lawsuit or a threat of lawsuit was what caused this change. And that since then, there hasn't really been a lot of conversation around trans inclusivity. And I mean, this is definitely speaking at the higher levels where, you know, for all intents and purposes, we're really talking about adults. But when you're talking about kids, I think this really speaks to what Mel and what Greg were talking about earlier about how there are such strong stereotypes of what it means to be a woman in sports and what it means to be a man in sport. And that to be successful, you need to, you know, as a dude, you got to be really, really macho, and you got to do the rah, 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 like, you know, not to use the term locker room talk, but, you know, to kind of be a part of that culture. For a woman, I think it is a little more fluid in that, but just based off of, you know, those rigid guidelines of what gender performance is in sports is in and of itself really barring entry for any person, any kid who is struggling with their gender identity, who may identify as non-binary, and who still really wants to play sports. And I'm not sure I know exactly what the best policy would be to create that inclusive environment. Know that it is so important for us to create a welcoming space, because I think all of us could speak to how much sports have, you know, like in us, like as adults, and like how we've grown up and how important they've been to us. And I think that we can, to allow any kid, regardless of their gender identity or their sexual orientation, to have that opportunity to like kind of have all of these really wonderful experiences is really important. And I think it just starts with having an environment where you are accepting and willing to understand their journey and just walk by with them as they discover what their identity is.
Right, absolutely. I think that's a lot of great points, you know, Maya, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on a lot of them. And you know, and even another interesting study that I found as well was a website called Out on the Fields, and basically with Out on the Fields, they surveyed close to 10,000 gay and straight athletes, you know, throughout the U.S. and really what they found is close to 85% of Americans have witnessed or experienced, you know, anti-LGBTQ attitudes in sports, and almost 90% of them who were surveyed said gay people are not at all accepted a little or moderately accepted within sport culture. And Tan, I'm going to toss it over to you first, and you know, especially with this study, and let's talk specifically, you know, professional golf for a minute. And obviously, you said it's been very positive so far in terms of that experience. So, does this kind of shock you in terms of some of these stats? I mean, do you think you know, there are still professional golfers out there who, you know, potentially would have negative attitudes or issues toward, you know, somebody who is part of our community?
I don't know. I think prior to coming out, I definitely thought that there would be more people that would be not accepting or against, you know, me being gay, that sort of thing. But from what I've experienced and what I've seen, just in sports in general, maybe it's just the change in times, but it is so different than what I expected.
Right.
The acceptance and inclusion that I have seen has been incredible, really, throughout all sports. And,
yeah.
But I know for sure that there are still people that, you know, aren't educated in this sort of thing, you know, enough to create that welcoming environment for junior golfers, for kids, and, you know, high school players, and basically all younger athletes. You know, and it's I think it starts with us. It starts with society, to be educated and to be supporting in that sense.
Yeah, that's very well put. It's very well put. And Mel, I want to toss it over to you, especially from you know, the LPGA standpoint. And obviously, you recently just did the video as well, which I was able to watch, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed watching that. You know, for the LPGA too. And you know, what would you say? I mean, especially with some of these stats and kind of your findings specifically to you know, the professional women's game specifically.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers are too high, in my opinion. I think, the thing that's coming to my mind really is that, I obviously know there are a lot of, gay golfers on the LPGA. I'm not expecting them, and I've always said this, I came out and I wanted my story to be heard because I feel that that's my way of giving back to the game. A lot of the LPGA girls do a fantastic job at giving back to the game in certain and different aspects and all kinds of areas. This was just my way of doing it. But I think that I would love the girls to be more comfortable, I think is probably a better word, that when they win and, just like the guys do, the guys on the PGA Tour, they have their families run out, the girls, we're a little bit different in that aspect. But I would love, one of my mates who I know is gay to win and their partner to just run out to them. Like that to me would be awesome. I think it would send a huge message out to not just the golfing world, but to the world of sport. So just something like that, I think wouldn't hurt at all. I for sure, if I, hopefully if all this work pays off and I have an opportunity to win a big event, there's no way that, my partner at the time, I wouldn't include her and, as part of my, winning formula, whatever you want to call it. I'm very proud to be who I'm with. And, for me, I would make it as normal as everybody else makes their relationships normal.
Right, absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting to hear obviously both sides of it. And, like you said, I think the more that, we can continue to create that visibility and how cool would it be, like you said, for a Solheim Cup event or an LPGA event to have, your partner coming out or, even for something like a major championship and, a husband or boyfriend coming out, and kiss them on the
I mean, it's just normalizing it. I mean, that's what it really is. Yeah, it's basically normalizing it. And if you're more, when people ask you, like, oh, do you have a husband? You're like, no, I have a wife. Like, if you make it quite as normal as that, people aren't quite scared of it and they don't really know how to react. They're like, oh. So the more normal that you make it in conversations, people tend to kind of go off your energy and go on that flow. But yeah, I mean, something like that, I think would have a huge impact, not just on golf, but on sport.
Awesome. Thank you both for for that insight. I really appreciate that, and I think it's some good takeaways, especially for some of the biggest stages within our game too, and just kind of transitioning from the stats side of things really to some tangible takeaways that I really want to get into. So especially this is for any, I think, high school, college golf coach, PGA instructor, somebody like Greg, parents even out there. And Greg, I want to toss this over to you too. And I try to really highlight a few of these takeaways. Championing respect, words matter, getting trained, staying informed, and obviously you work with a lot of juniors yourself. And I would just for a PGA pro or a coach, how did they begin to do that? How do you do that? I would say specifically with some of your players that you coach.
Well, here in Northern California with our diversity and inclusion program, we're trying to educate all of the PGA professionals around the region so that they know the terminology to use and how to handle situations and make things acceptable for everyone, so every junior that comes out feels comfortable. I think the thing with coaches is if you suspect a young girl or boy is gay or wants to come out of the closet, I think you can't pressure them or you got to let them come out of the closet and come to you. And so just using the correct terminology with all of the parents and other players and everything is really important, that you get the terminology included in all of your day-to-day talk so that somebody who is coming out of the closet or wants to feels like they can. And it's just got to happen naturally. But educating teachers, parents is a big deal too. Educating the parents on terminology and how to treat either their son or daughter who comes out or a son or daughter's friend who comes out or as a teammate. It's got to create an inclusive atmosphere so everybody feels comfortable.
Right, absolutely. And Maya, just kicking it over to you for a second. Do you think, creating a curriculum, or obviously what we're doing tonight with this webinar, or even different articles, what do you think are just some of the best ways to, really help these coaches and just pros and anybody who's involved with a junior golfer to create a better atmosphere?
I think Greg really hit the nail on the head with, creating an environment that is supportive of somebody to come out. So that's something as simple as, for a kid who may be discovering their gender, just standing out there and introducing yourself with your name and your pronouns, because just by saying your pronouns out there, it creates this environment for someone to feel comfortable and not awkward about saying, please use they or them or she or her. I think language and watching our language is so important, and absolutely there are times that we may mess up, and that's okay. I think it's really important to come at all of this when you are kind of like a guiding force in a junior golfer's life, to just come at it with this attitude of wanting to learn and wanting to help juniors figure out their identity and kind of understand who they are, and like Greg said, not forcing them, respecting that like this whole journey is their own, and that for those of us on the outside, we're just here to support them. And I would also note that it's difficult for different queer players from different backgrounds, and I think if you do have people of color, kids of color who may be queer or struggling with those identities, I think a really, really important thing for coaches and instructors and parents is to be aware that the queer POC experience is going to be different from a non-POC experience, and that to recognize and acknowledge and validate that like those experiences are going to be different, and what they're struggling with, hopefully they don't have to struggle with a lot, but just being there and validating that, and not trying to toss it to the side.
Absolutely. Thank you both for that. I think some great takeaways, especially for coaches, and, really spending a little bit of time, I think, on teammates and friends, because obviously that's a segment that I hope, this webinar reaches. Mel, I'm going to kick it over to you for a second. And, especially if you, maybe even sharing your story, obviously when you came out, your free friends or teammates, if they don't know how to address a situation, how can they still be with their friend, but also act as an ally and a supporter to their sexuality or to their newfound, identity or even gender that, they might be, struggling with or really trying to come to grips with?
I mean, I don't know really. I mean, to be completely honest, I think acting as normal as possible.
Yeah.
Probably, the greatest. You don't need to make a sing and dance about it. You just need to just be exactly how you were before, This whole thing is all about, we talk about the education. Again, what Greg was saying earlier from a coach's point of view, I thought he made a fantastic point. I think it's also about approachability, from a coach's point of view, but it's all about just normalizing everything. Just, people are going to still have their opinions no matter what. That's unfortunately just the walks of life in all walks of life. But for me, it's just about normalizing everything, just making everything completely normal, and because it is normal.
Right.
That's the thing, it is normal, and we're just trying to, just help people who are probably in environments where they don't think it is normal, is to just try and show them that, it is completely normal, and we're just trying to educate, the people around them that it is normal as well, just to make everybody feel a lot more comfortable about it if they're not quite sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ed, for yourself, like you said, it was a pretty supportive environment and atmosphere. I mean, what would you say for, especially somebody who might have a teammate or a friend, who is basically either coming out or wanting to? I mean, what can they do just to be that ally, be that friend that they need to be?
Like, just with my experiences, the best thing even my parents, they just ask questions, And if you're not sure, there's nothing wrong with asking them, you know, what you're curious about. And whether it's something that you may agree with or not agree with, that we need to still be able to support each other and to love each other as we are. And, you know, we need to be able to respect that part of ourselves. And, you know, for me, I think that's the biggest thing. You need to respect each other, whether it's something you agree with or not. Right. And, you know, I mean, it's like, if I see someone and I don't like their hair, like, I'm not going to treat them badly because of that, you know? And, and it's just, it's, you know, your opinion about someone else doesn't give you the right to treat them poorly. And I think that's something that we all need to understand, myself included. And
wow, say that again. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I think I need to like get it tattooed on my forehead or something. But no, it's I think, like I said, regardless of everything, we just need to be supportive of each other and just respect each other for who we are.
Absolutely. Some great insight. You know, thank you both for that. And transitioning over to, you know, especially kind of some major things that really, I think, you know, are happening even as we speak here in 2019. And Greg, obviously I wanted you to touch on this specifically, obviously what you guys are doing with the Northern California PGA chapter. Obviously I want you to touch more on it, but you're looking to, you know, host even an event this coming June for Pride Month. Over at Harding Park, which is hosting the next year's PGA Championship. So, yeah, could you tell a little bit more on that?
Yeah, well, really exciting time in golf, in that all the governing bodies are becoming very supportive of diversity and inclusion. So that's not just LGBTQ community; that's women in general, African Americans. Latino community, Asian community, the PGA of America, USGA, PGA Tour. It's on everybody's mind, and it's an initiative for everybody. So the PGA of America now has a female president. Our section of Northern California Golf Association, or PGA of America, has a female president. So things are changing. Initiatives are being put in place to change things. It's really, really encouraging. So things are going to start happening. Events are going to start happening, and so I feel like I can start making things happening here in California. And so I'm collaborating with the San Francisco Gay Pride organization to have an annual Gay Pride tournament during the Pride Week in June every year at Harding Park, which is the course where PGA of America is having a championship next year. And I couldn't be more excited about an event like this happening, because it feels like validating me and my career towards something that I actually am passionate about and care about. And hopefully it's going to create awareness for everybody in our community, but hopefully be visible enough that other people in other sports see it and be supportive and create participation and sponsorships and raise money for the Pride Foundation. And it's just the first of many kind of things around the country, because all the governing bodies are being supportive. And so like our call and events like this are just beginning, and it's really, really exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, it's so cool. You know, the fact it's really taking shape, and you know, it's not one of those that you just continue to talk about it, but there's actual action being had. And especially when we were talking the other day, I know you weren't here, but what is it? We're going to have drag queens on each par 3 or something.
Well, that was the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking about the tournament. It was like a foursome of drag queens playing together, which would be quite a sight. But what other place other than San Francisco to have that happen?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Make it a fun event, right? For everybody. That's fantastic. And you know, and I think, and obviously when we were kind of collaborating with this was before Greg and I had this conversation, this event. So something I found kind of early on in the year, which I thought is a fantastic event. It's called the German Rainbow Open. A lot of people have no idea what this is. It's Europe's largest LGBTQ organized golf tournament. It's actually in its 15th year. And sorry, guys, a little bit here. Could be good. But basically, the tournament committee has organized 6 tournaments throughout Germany each season, each year. So, like you said, Greg, if who knows, with the event that you guys are doing in San Fran, I mean, it could expand to different PGA chapters, sections throughout the country, and it could be something similar. I hope you guys get a picture as good as this one, for this coming year.
Yeah, we'll definitely recreate that picture right there at Harding Park this June. And there's already other organizations like this around the country too, besides just the one starting. There's events in Palm Springs and down in the desert. There's events in Las Vegas and all around the country that people have put a lot of good work in to start already. And now we just need to get it all connected and all working towards the same, goal on a higher level.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. And just, a couple activation items that, I wanted to touch on, and I think kind of everybody can chime in here a little bit. And I think, Maya, I'd like you to maybe touch on as well, because I know, we've had talks in terms of, hey, can some of the professional tours or ranks, can we do like a Pride themed day, or maybe visibility of, rainbow flags, or whether it be a ribbon or something like that, for some of the events. So, is that something that, I know you've had some talks with before in the past with some of the governing bodies?
Yeah, I mean, every time I think about this, I think about what the world of golf could do. I always think about what the U.S. women's national soccer team does every for Pride Month, and just seeing that every month they turn the numbers on the jerseys to a rainbow print, and they have social media engagement talking and celebrating the LGBTQ community, and creating this like really, really wonderful environment that is like we were saying, it's creating this space where people feel comfortable to go out and play, to go out and watch a match, and to be like super, super supportive of this team, because they are also being, of our identities. And so I think about that, and it's just really, really simple things that the USWNT does. And I'm like, okay, like the golf world could do this too. It's like maybe, I know that frequently we see players on the LPGA and PGA Tour wear ribbons for different causes on their hats or pins. So why not throw up a rainbow pin for the month of June? Or I don't know, like making one of the tee boxes like a pride activation, or turning a flag to the rainbow colored flag. It's all very, very simple things that can be done, but are done in a very visible way, and can really show, like women's soccer does, that this is a space where you can feel comfortable and where we are going to celebrate, what you're doing. I know for me, a lot of what carried me through all of my career was actually seeing what women's soccer did. And I was lucky enough to connect with Megan Rapinoe, who has been really, really, influential in advocating for, LGBT equality in sports. And just seeing someone like that be out and be proud, kick so much butt on the field, and also use their platform to fight for gender equality, for LGBTQ plus equality and inclusion, was so powerful for me, because it was almost as if she was telling me that I do, as a queer woman, belong in sport, and I can, be very, very successful. And I just think a lot about what that would have meant if, that person was a golfer. To see, multiple golfers out there, like we're seeing with like Mal and Tad, who are doing like awesome stuff, being visible and vocal about inclusion, seeing that and seeing more people do that, and seeing the governing bodies support that in a very visible way. I think it can have such a huge effect on younger golfers and older golfers alike, just really reinforcing that we welcome you, you belong here, and this is a space for you just as it's for us who are not a part of the community.
Absolutely. And yeah, just quickly on your end, what are your thoughts for like the PGA Tour doing something similar to that? Do you think that's something you could see ultimately happening in the near future?
Yeah, I mean it's really not that difficult. You see the PGA Tour, as well as LPGA Tour. But speaking for the PGA Tour, I mean you see them do ribbons and all these different things for these causes. They're all great, and I think the LGBTQ plus community should be a part of that. And like Mel said, I'm sorry, that Maya said, like just doing ribbons or flags or whatever it is, but it doesn't take that much. It's just bringing visibility and that sort of thing to our community, and that will allow us to grow the game.
Right. Small things that can really make a big impact, right? Make a big difference. So
For sure.
Yeah, and just transitioning, guys, into some action items here, and really this I think is one that specifically again could be for coaches, could be for friends, parents, you name it. Greg, I think especially I want to lean on you for this. So what can I as a coach or a parent, and obviously you've touched on this, but can do that can make the game of golf really a more welcoming atmosphere for all. Just creating that safe space for junior golfers that identify as LGBTQ, who are either coming out or still questioning?
Well, I think first off is just continuing what we're doing right now, talking, educating, awareness, so that the word and the training gets out to more people, specifically the people we're talking about, coaches, parents of athletes. But I think one thing that might help at the high school level to just create a more welcoming environment is more connection between gay-straight alliances, which now almost, I think every high school, definitely college, has clubs like that, and the athletic department. So events together to create some synergy between the two, so there's not so much of a stigma between now the gay kids that are at the GSA meeting and then the athletes that are out on the field.
Yeah.
Some synergy there, I think, would really create a more welcoming environment at the high school level. But the biggest thing is definitely just continuing education, and maybe even making it mandatory.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if we can get to that point, but it might just be a good idea to get where we want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Mel, quick thoughts on your end, especially from the coaching or the parent side of things, especially in your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Greg. I think that, everything is moving in the right direction. We need to remember that, times are changing. People are becoming more educated on this subject and more aware of it. And, again, I feel like from a high school point of view, have exactly the same, punishment as you would for bullying. Obviously it's a form of bullying, and just don't stand for it. As a coach, as a principal, you just don't stand for that kind of behavior towards another pupil. And again, I know I keep going back to it. I feel like I'm constantly repeating myself, but it is all about education. The more people are educated on this, I feel that it will change their opinions. Some people's opinions you're not going to change, but you're going to change more opinions than not if you educate them in the correct way.
Absolutely. Thank you both for that. Some great insight, especially on the high school side. So definitely some great action items. And this is for everyone. And I'll similar to what we did in the beginning, Ted, I want to start with you. And I think this is important from a perspective standpoint, right? We're all at points in our lives where we are comfortable with our sexuality, but turn back the clock 5 years, 10 years, a couple years, and just realize obviously the struggles that we went through when we were coming out. And the question, Ted, that I'll ask you and I'll ask everybody is, if you could talk to your 14 or 15-year-old self today and share some advice with them on their identity and their sexuality, what would it be?
It's really hard because everyone is so different,
yeah.
and everyone kind of progresses at a different rate. For me personally, I would just say that it's okay. You know, you can take your time with it, and you don't have to put yourself into one bubble or another. You can kind of take your time and explore and do that sort of thing. And just know that the people that care about you and love you will always love you regardless.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm still learning today. And I probably will continue learning for the rest of my life. But you don't have to change who you are. You have to be your true self to give your best gifts to this world. And that's something that I've learned through coming out. You know, and it's I just can't say how important it is to just be yourself, share your story, support other people, and just love one another for who we are.
Fantastic. Mel, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously agree with Tad. You know, I have a quote that I always go back to is be the best version of yourself. The quicker people become comfortable within their own skin, you know, you don't only have an impact on, you know, your career and yourself personally, but you don't realize how much of an impact you have on other people around you. You know, we're all striving to be comfortable in our own skin, and people take longer than others. But, you know, as long as you get there at some point in your life, you're going to affect and influence a lot more people than just yourself. So that's probably the biggest thing I can say is just, there's only one of you. You have to be the best version of yourself.
Maya?
I would probably tell myself to not put so much weight in thinking that it's going to get better, because I don't think that as soon as you come out, whether it's to yourself or to anybody else, that it automatically becomes better. I think that as we grow and become more comfortable in our identities and start discovering new things about ourselves, we gain the tools to just be able to deal with things differently, and our relationships to both of our identities and our and the people in our lives change, and it makes us stronger. And so I think I would say to give yourself time and space and patience, and just be really kind to yourself as you're figuring out who you are, because like Tad said, like it's a unique journey for each one of us. And what is true for me it won't be true for somebody else. So I think that patience and that kindness with yourself is so important, and can ultimately get you to that point where you are being the best version of yourself, like Mel mentioned, and able to affect so many people.
Awesome. Finally, Greg.
Yeah. I would definitely tell my 14 or 15-year-old self to get out there on the court, you know, or the field or the course. You know, I think too many gay kids are sitting in the stands, so to speak, you know, quote unquote, sitting in the stands with their friends that they're comfortable with, but maybe they want to be out there playing and they don't. And so, I mean, I would definitely tell myself to keep, you know, at that time playing basketball, or keep playing football, or practice golf harder because I'm allowed to be there. And that takes a certain amount of self-esteem and self-confidence. And so that's what gay kids, now that they're out, need to get that same confidence that straight kids get naturally, that keep them on the court or the field or whatever. And so gay kids need to have that feeling and stay on the court if they want to be.
Thank you all for that insight. I think very well put. Yeah, and a lot of good items for everybody to definitely take home, and especially just touching on some resources available. Again, I do want to especially give some special thank yous, and some of those especially go out to Matt Allen, especially with the PGA of Canada. First of all, thank you for allowing us to use your platform here this evening to do this webinar. Really greatly appreciate that. Even at the You Can Play project as well, which is a fantastic site. They do a lot of ton of work with high schools, with colleges, doing different types of media projects, videos. Ryan Pettengill over there, Executive Director. Again, thank you for taking the time to speak with me and give me some of your insight. Sid Ziegler, especially over at Outsports, again, a fantastic site where a lot of youth and coaches and parents and teammates can read just different coming out stories from all different walks of life, all different types of athletes, as well trans athletes, another fantastic site, especially for those looking to learn more about the trans community, really what that means and how to create safer spaces for them as well. And Ann Lieberman over at Athlete Ally, do appreciate her time as well. Sandy Cross, Molly Galanton over at the PGA of America too, really appreciate their help and support, especially getting this out to their greater community. And again, the Trevor Project, just a fantastic organization, especially if any LGBTQ youth is struggling really severely with coming out or just their overall identity. It's a fantastic resource, and they're there to help you as well. So everyone, again, I can't thank my panel enough for being with us here tonight. So Maya, Greg, Mel, Tad, thank you all for taking the time. And what I'd like to do now is kind of open this up for a Q&A for some of our participants here. If you do have questions, that chat box that I was sending some messages over earlier, I greatly appreciate if you can maybe just type in a few messages there, and we'd be happy to answer them as they come in. So really appreciate everybody's time here tonight.
And Chris, thanks to you for organizing this. This is fantastic and the first of many like it. So good work.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. This is awesome.
Hopefully be one of many that we could do. So
for sure.
Celebrate a win for Mel too, right?
Yeah.
It's coming.
How are you playing, Mel? Are you playing good right now?
Not really. Well, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to figure that out. Golf's a funny one. You feel so far away sometimes and yet so close other times. Like every day's different. But I'm working hard and I've changed a lot. Like obviously I've moved country, like come out of a big relationship, changed coach, changed trainer. So I'm just hoping that all this hard work will eventually catch up and hopefully we'll kind of go running with it. So I've just got to keep with the process and keep patient. But yeah, it's a frustrating game. I don't know why I took it up in the first place, but yeah, it drives me nuts, honestly.
Because we all love it.
I know. I hit one good shot and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm back, don't worry. But yeah, it's no, I do love it, but it's it drives me absolutely nuts sometimes.
You guys have a tournament in Northern California this year?
We've got in San Francisco and LA actually. We've got one LA's not really north, is it? But yeah, we've got one in the very center of LA, and then we've got San Francisco the week after.
That's Lake Merced, right?
That's right, yeah. Good golf course. Great golf course.
Yeah, great. I'll come up to watch you and say hi.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let me know if you need anything at all during that week. Just let us know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and everyone, again, we still have a couple participants on here. We have a nice message. It's great. I'll just read this aloud from the AJGA. Thank you, Chris, as the representative from the AJGA tonight. This is great information and perspective. We're fully embracing the D&I concept from all angles for juniors and staffing. Look forward to taking this back with my team and growing from it. Thank you to all the panelists. So it's awesome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
I love the AJGA. It also gives me like PTSD from like junior golf days.
It's exciting, and we're so grateful to them too. They're actually awarding some performance stars for our national invitational this June to some of the top finishers, which is pretty cool. This is great. So we got a message from David here. Thanks everyone for organizing this, doing a great job. Biggest challenge I deal with is a queer person in golf. It's just dealing with all the jokes and homophobic language people in golf make, usually almost all the men, making locker room banter type remarks. Just wondering how everyone goes about dealing with this. I find it tough because I am not a confrontational person.
I'll take that one because I'm around the country club and course environment every day. So I got people coming in and out of the golf course every day, whether I'm working or playing. And And I've been around sports a lot, and so I know how guys are, and I just tell myself that I know that that's how guys are. That's how they talk to each other. And because we're in a transitional time in the world right now, men just don't know how else to talk to each other yet. You know, they don't have the words for not joking around like that. So it just is words. And half the time when I'm in a group like that and somebody makes a gay joke or whatever, 10 minutes later, somebody asks me if I'm married, and I say, yeah, I'm married to my husband. And everything changes, and the terminology and the talking and the jokes change to a different mode. And so I think most of the time it's just the way guys are. And if they know what the situation is, they would change, and they just need to be aware of what's going on. So me being able to be myself changes them. And like for the time being makes them like better people, if that makes sense. So it's not going to stop, but it's going to change slowly. And being being okay with yourself and the whole situation really helps a lot. I don't know if that made sense, but I hope that helped.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a weird. Oh yeah, go Tad.
No. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I've experienced a lot of that as well, and it's very weird when you're a woman and you're in like a playing group with a bunch of dudes, and because queerness, sexual orientation in a lot of senses is an invisible identity. Not a lot of people can point at someone and be like, aha, that person is a part of the LGBTQ community. I think that kind of opens up a space for people to talk as they would, not knowing if somebody is queer in their group. And like Greg said, like being visible and being like, hello, I am the queer one, is really helpful in changing perspectives, but oftentimes it's really hard to do that if you don't feel safe in talking about yourself. And I know for me, it's been, I totally empathize with you because I don't know myself how to deal with it. Like when I go out and play with people at like Torrey or like any of the country clubs out here, it's trying to figure out, how do I create a space where I will still be able to play really good golf, not feel super uncomfortable, stand up for myself, and also not, be in a confrontational situation where we're like having, like arguments or things like that. And it's hard. And I don't really have an answer. All of this is just to say that I really do empathize with you. And I do think that one of the ways that these jokes and this language and the locker room banter stops and changes is through conversations like the ones that we're having today, and through the wider discourse that we're having, in the world of sport, that is really kind of taking these jokes to task and really describing them like they are, which is harmful to a lot of people.
Great. Yeah. I think that's some great insight, yeah, from everybody. And even we have a note here from great, actually I was in touch with him last night, and he's been a part of even our collegiate club golf side of things, and he's been a great ambassador for us, and he's runs the first tee of Greater Seattle. And this was a message he just sent to me, but even asking would anybody from the panel be interested in being a go-to person for any of the kids that we work with that might still have questions or need advice. I mean, I don't want to speak for you guys, but I would say probably all of us,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I want to make sure, obviously, for the panelists, I did include everybody's personal email up here too. So please, again, feel free to reach out to us, especially after this, if you have questions or want to connect offline. Hey, I think we'd be all more than happy to help and continue the discussion as well.
Absolutely.
So. Well, perfect. And I don't know if I see any other questions coming through, but everyone, I know we were a little over the time tonight, but that's okay. I think it was well worth it and a great discussion. And again, to to my panel, can't thank you guys enough for being here. And like I said, my hope is this is one of many to come, and we can continue to do this, and obviously continue the conversation and just opening our game to as many as possible, and really just seeing it grow, which I know is a goal for everyone. So
Thanks, Chris.
perfect.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys, hey, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time, and hey, can't wait till we're able to do it again. So
Okay, talk to everybody soon. Thanks.
guys,
care.
thanks so much. Play well, Mel. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck, Mel.
Thanks, guys. See you later.
See you guys. Thanks so much.